So I'm going to ask just a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to the group. So you've done a lot of positive work, both in Colorado and in Africa. Which are you most pleased with, and why?
I get that question a lot, actually, especially as I started veering into international issues. And the common question you would actually get was, why are you? There's so much need in your own community. Why would you possibly go and do something in another community somewhere else halfway around the world? And my message is, I think, with our young people right now is how do we tap into their desire to serve, and wherever you can serve, wherever you feel that your skills can gravitate to, why wouldn't we serve that community? And yes, there's plenty of people in Colorado who need food, and I assure you there's plenty of people in Africa who need food. So I don't know that it matters which of those people you provide food to. I think that that piece of service is how do you gravitate and find something you want to do. With the kids who come with me to East Africa, my message is I don't expect most of them to actually work in East Africa. I expect that their experiences in East Africa will prompt them to think about what they can do in their own community. And so for me, when I work with a young person, or I see somebody go back to work, if it's a homeless dude in downtown Denver or a Ugandan who's never had a job in his entire life, I'm perfectly happy with either one. And so I enjoy both.
Great.
It's a good political answer, too.
It was very good. I kind of
right down the center.
I could learn from that. If you could change one thing about America that you think could have the most positive impact for people, what would that be?
I tapped into it. Hands down, our discourse and the way we talk to each other. Both sides, we talked about it this in the roundtable. There's no finger pointing to be done. There's no one sector or one party. We all have to think about how we talk to each other. I talk to my staff about it all the time. The one thing that gets you voted off the island in the work that you do with me is if I ever hear you talking badly about somebody personally. That we can fight the issues and we can have disagreements about education and those. But when we talk badly about each other, it's killing our ability to do things together. And if I could change one thing, we've got to change the discourse. We have the two principles that John Hickenlooper inculcated in me is to work hard and to be nice. And we've got the work hard thing down awesome. We know how to work really hard. We're getting better at it. Technology's allowed us to work better at it. We're really good at it. We don't have the second down. And it needs a lot of work, and we all have to model that, and we have to think about how we talk to everybody from the grocery store clerk who's not moving fast enough to the colleague in our office that we completely disagree with because of the way that they voted or the way that they're thinking or the way that they're talking. And if we don't change that discourse, we will not change the issues that we're talking about.
Right. What do you think will be the legacy of the Hickenlooper administration?
Well, I should let my boss talk on that. I'm being recorded, and there's a reporter in the room, and so yeah, the legacy is it was rooted in collaboration. We didn't do everything right, and we haven't, but the work that we've always done has been rooted in collaboration. And there's no margin in enemies, that you always have everybody at the table. The Biennial of the Americas, how do we bring our neighbors together from Latin America and South America and Canada? Our homeless initiative, how do you bring everybody to the table? We're working on a cybersecurity initiative right now. We're not picking one company to do it. It's that piece of how do we look at all of the companies who understand cybersecurity and bring them into the room together to figure things out. And I think, I look at the Pedal the Plains and our eastern plains of how do we create awareness in our eastern plains. When we were on the campaign, we heard from people all the time that we don't see or hear from you once you get elected. And it's that piece of how do we create a space for us to understand that agriculture is critical to our economy. And so I hope that one of many legacies that Governor Hickenlooper has really hones in on his commitment to good government and to collaboration.
Great. Let's open up to the group. What questions do we have? Nicole?
My question is actually twofold. If I were to come in contact with a homeless, where would be the first place where I could recommend them to go, how to get connected, where the closest location is to go spend the night if it was a cold night? And then the other one is, where would you recommend somebody to get involved if you were somebody like me?
So the question Nicole had is if she met a homeless person, where would you recommend for them to go? And if someone wanted to get involved in serving them, what would you recommend for them to be involved with?
Thank you. The answer is kind of the same, actually. You know, in the collaborative work that we have done in the community, one of the most outstanding institutions in our community is our Mile High United Way. And they created a call system called 211 that really pulled all of the services together so that people could know about how to access, so that a homeless person could call 211, a provider could call 211, you could call 211 and say, hey, I can't pay my utility bills this month. Is there a nonprofit that I could talk to? But the idea was to create a kind of a clearinghouse for that. And so that is a great asset to our community. It's a great way for folks who don't know that much about homeless services to be able to direct somebody to care. And in that same vein, you know, I think that that 211 call line has actually become a really great way for folks to say, I want to get involved and volunteer. And so if you call that number and you say, I really care about our senior citizens, or actually tonight I really applaud folks, housing our homeless veterans should be a priority for every community around this country. And so if you want to do those kind of things, you can call and we can talk about, or they talk about which services are available, and they're amazing. Thanks.
I'll also add to that, serving the homeless are near and dear to my heart. I served at Samaritan House Homeless Shelter for years, recommend that highly. And another great one is Joshua Station, which is right basically 6th and I-25. That's really focused on families. So recommend those. Yes?
Okay, so I know right now affordable housing is a very hot button issue in Denver. We have a lot of it, and especially working for real estate, I've seen a lot of developers say it's really hard for them to get the financing, and it doesn't like make sense for them to build it because of like the returns and all that. But then there's this huge need for affordable housing. So you've been talking about collaborating with the public and private sector. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you guys are doing right now to alleviate that problem and explore finding solutions?
The question is, there's not enough affordable housing right now in Denver specifically, and what is the administration doing to maybe help alleviate that situation?
Great. It's a great question. I think a lot of communities around the country are wrestling with it right now, and Denver is definitely not an exception to that. I think that one of the ways that we're responding to it right now is really looking at the financing issues. The Division of Housing is working really closely right now with CHAFA, with Colorado Housing Finance Authority, and really looking at different ways that we can incentivize investment in affordable housing. Affordable housing is hard because there's less resources, and it's not something that is easily incentivizable in terms of development. And so how do you figure out how to do that? We have an amazing Division of Housing. General Halter from Colorado Springs actually runs the Department of Local Affairs, and Pat Coyle, who worked with us on Denver's Road Home, really pushes forward our affordable housing efforts. They'll all tell you that there's not an easy answer to that. We're dealing with an enormous, I always talk about the fact that there's never really a good time to be homeless. When the economy is really good, affordable housing is really hard to come by, but jobs tend to be a little bit more plentiful. And when the economy is bad, affordable housing is a little bit more affordable, but there aren't very many jobs. And so you got to figure out those dynamics. And so we spend a lot of time working on that. And I think you'll see, not just in Colorado, but what you're seeing trend across the country right now is if you don't figure out how to build affordable housing and you don't figure out how to address that issue, you're going to have an economic development issue in your community. Because when you start outpricing people who need to live and work in your community, you either increase homelessness or you disincentivize people coming to your community that you want to live there. And so I think all of us are trying to figure that out. I think Colorado is working really closely with all of our cities around the state to figure it out. And I think what some of you from outside of Denver know this, but a lot of people don't realize that there's not just an affordable housing issue in Denver. If you go into some of our rural communities, it is a huge issue in terms of how we finance it and how we make it happen.
Yes, over here. We'll come right to you. Whoa.
Recently, our friends at Uber created a truck that took some gear and had an autonomous vehicle that drove it. And truck driving is one of the top careers that homeless people can get as a way to get themselves out of homelessness. What do you see as like the future of this technology? Do you see it going towards universal basic income?
So, okay, let me try to repeat what you said. So with new technologies coming along, it's displacing job opportunities for a lot of people. And I didn't understand the second part of your question.
Do you see universal basic income?
Do you see universal basic income?
The idea that if there's no more jobs, there's some experiments in Utrecht and different parts of the world where instead of jobs, they're just saying they get this kind of a grant. How do your experiences working with the homeless inform, the way that you think about universal basic income, or is it even part of the discussion right now?
So based on technology displacing jobs, do you think the concept of universal basic income will be something that governments are going to provide?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer this right for you, but I think that the employment piece is huge right now, and so to your point, as our technology increases, one of the things that, and the governor talks about this a lot, when you start looking at people who are frustrated and mad, it's not just our homeless. If you look at the people who are out of work or have lost jobs because of technology or because mechanization and they don't have that place, the biggest challenge we've got and the thing that we've got to spend a lot of time figuring out is how do we retrain people? And how do we look at opportunities for folks to go back to work in sectors that they were trained for? How do we retrain them and tap into those skills for new skills that are developing? Because at the same time that there's jobs that have gone away through technology and through mechanization, there's new jobs that are being created. And for the public sector and the nonprofit sector, we have to be working with the nonprofit community to figure out where those jobs are and where do you put people who have great skills and want to contribute, but no longer have the jobs that they had 10 years ago. If we don't figure that out, some of the anger and the discourse that's happening right now are folks saying they got forgot. That they had a job that they were trained for and now they're no longer relevant. Well, how do we make a space for those folks to have jobs that play to their skill set? And a lot of that comes from retraining and retooling and thinking differently about how we do our workforce development and social services.
That's right. Janine, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, how has the marijuana affected homelessness, especially with young people? And I know that that's what you started with young people. And then my second question is, how do we prevent this? Because as the data that I see with regard to homelessness and poverty, a lot of it is just a trend of broken relationships and drug use and substance abuse. And so I really think we need to look at not only caring for the homeless, but also doing something for prevention.
So the question is, with regards to Colorado specifically, how has marijuana affected the homeless population? And then the second part of the question is, with regards to the ongoing trend of homelessness, how do you not only help the people, but also address the root causes of it to end in the future?
Never get out of a room without talking about marijuana. My best friend on the planet is Andrew Friedman. He regulates it, and he's my housemate. And so I've stopped telling people that I know him so I don't have to talk about marijuana. It's a great question on homelessness. The data right now, we're looking at it. We should understand it. I am less of a believer. It's definitely had an impact on our community in terms of costs, in terms of who's coming here and who's moving here. The homeless, we had to deal with the homeless by choice, or the if you build it, they will come years ago when we were doing Denver's Right. If you build all this housing, everybody on the planet's going to move to Denver to be homeless. And it's like, well, if they could do that, then they probably figure out how to not be homeless in their own community. I think that when we look at the marijuana issue, I think that we've got to look at trends, and it's a little bit too early on some of them. We're looking at the homeless piece to see the impact. Most of your homeless providers would say that there's definitely been a tick. I'm sure people have come here to experience the culture. I don't think that that's driving our homeless population. I think that if you're smoking weed and homeless in Seattle, you probably don't need to travel to Denver to get it. And so I don't think that you have this magnet effect. I think we should pay attention to it. And I think what the marijuana issue brings up is that whatever it is, if it's alcohol or marijuana or drugs in general, we need to make sure that we're responding to the treatment needs of our community. And a lot of the people that you're talking about, and when I go back to my Urban Peak days and put on my Urban Peak hat, a lot of those kids who ended up at Urban Peak who were homeless wasn't because their parents didn't care about them. It was because their parents had untreated mental health and substance abuse. issues. And so the prevention side of that comes, and I think we have to pay a lot of attention to it, is how are we making sure that people don't have untreated mental illness and substance abuse issues? There's not very many people. I always push back on this whole notion of homeless by choice. It's a very easy out. And we hear somebody, we talk to somebody, it's like, oh, Stan's going to stay outside. He doesn't really want to go inside. He's lazy. And Stan might actually probably be at a place where he's being a little bit lazy and making a poor choice. But there's nobody that I've met in the 20 years that I've done homeless services that at the age of 12 said, I hope that at I'm 20 years old, I'm pushing a cart and drinking out of a bottle and begging people for money. And so we've got to change that piece. And it's probably the prevention side of it that you're raising and the amazing work that you've done around prevention, that if we don't invest in those services around substance abuse and mental health, that we'll continue to have a homeless issue. And so it's both sides. You have to address both of those issues to be effective.
Good point. Yes. Purnima?
I want
Very
to
per
touch
second.
on the work that you're doing in Africa, because you're saying that DU students are going and training them in Uganda, right? Are they getting any kind of certification? The Ugandans is what I'm talking about.
So what type of education did you say?
DU students are going and training
Yes.
people in Africa.
Uh-huh.
And so is those students that they are training, are they getting any certifications affiliated with DU?
Okay.
Or it's just a exchange thing and
Are the students that are going to Africa getting any certifications with regards to their work there through DU?
not the DU students?
Okay. The Ugandans.
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
Wonderful.
And I also wanted to add to it and say that what you're doing in Africa can be implemented in India and many other parts of the world. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I would agree with that. And we are at the very beginning stages of trying to figure that out. You know, in terms of the certification, DU's School of Hospitality is doing the basic certification. What happens is if a company knows that we have students who have hospitality experience that have trained these students to go, these Ugandans to go in the workforce, that it has street cred in the same way that when you hire somebody and you know that they've gone to an accredited institution, has some gravitas to it. And so we've got to figure out the certification. We really want to grow it and develop it. We've been talking to Cornell to look at how do we figure this out. So we really started this as a pilot to say, rather than we're listening and thinking right now, we're doing a little bit of acting because I want to figure it out before we go on and say, well, what certification is necessary and what does that look like? But what's been very humbling is kind of figuring out what does it take to put people back into the workforce and how do you do that? And we're learning. And I think actually, to the gentleman's point in the back, technology will have a significant role in that. It's a great equalizer right now. And I think it's not just Uganda, but countries all around the world are coming alive. And there's different ways that we can work together and support one another.
I think that kind of thing, you will get a lot of interest from India, at least that's the country I know most, is that if that certification collaboration is there, whether it's from DU or Cornell or whoever, that'll open a lot
Makes
of
all
doors.
the difference in the world.
You
You're
bet.
absolutely right.
Let's finish up with the last question from Ralph. You had your hand raised.
Yeah, there was a piece on television a couple days ago about homeless being rounded up downtown Denver. It was kind of an unfair piece, I thought. People not so much the homeless as people who were doing the rounding up out of the city. So I'm kind of curious about that. Where do you, if you do gather up, where do you put them?
So the question that Ralph had, there was some news regarding rounding up some homeless people, and where do they go, and what's that process?
Rob, I didn't see this story, and I haven't been intimately involved in Denver's homeless services right now. What I've learned over the years is that with a lot of the stories that we hear on that, nobody's ever as good as everybody says they are, and nobody's as bad as everybody says they are. And so, and kind of getting into the root of those stories, it's complicated. The homeless in particular, we always approach it, and my response to it is, regardless of when we talk about legislating the homeless, encampments and panhandling ordinances and whatnot. You can't do that without actually providing services for somebody. There's a physics principle that matter can't be destroyed, it can only be displaced. So if you move homeless people, you have to move them somewhere. And when you move them somewhere and you don't provide them with services, you've just created a new problem somewhere else. And so you can displace people, but if you're really looking at healthy community, engagement. It's that piece of how do you engage them in services and what does that look like? But then there's an accountability piece of if you create those services and you create a space, and when we were dealing with the homeless on the 16th Street Mall, we said we're going to make sure that everybody has access to services, everybody has access to shelter, everybody has access to housing. But if we do all of those things and homeless Joe still wants to lay in front of the Hard Rock Cafe's main entrance, that's a problem. And so then there needs to be accountability. And we've always, John Hickenlooper from his restaurant days is very clear that we'll get you a job and we're going to put you back to work, but we're going to hold you accountable. Like we're not here just to provide you a service, but we have to provide the folks with an alternative. You can't tell people that you can't sit or lie someplace and not give them a human place to do that. It doesn't make sense. So
That's great.
great.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your great conversation.
Let's give Jamie a round of applause.